Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Well, once again, we're back to Coaching Matters, and we're talking this time round about preparing to win. We've got a fantastic lineup. I'm going to pass you on to Cliff in a moment to introduce them. But from my side, warm welcome to all those who've registered and are tuning in. As you know, this is one of the projects that we have in the Global Athletics Coaching Academy. More of that probably later, but let's get into business straight away. Over to you, Cliff.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And yeah, very much a warm welcome from me to the participants on this Coaching Matters. This is the fourth for this year, um, and it's the last one until we meet again early next year. So, are you prepared to win? Planning and periodization for winning performance. So, this is something that's very topical for most of us as coaches, and I think most coaches would probably agree that preparation is central to your work and subsequently impacts the quality of coach and athlete performance. But how do coaches plan and periodize training to peak when it counts the most? And what are their key elements in designing impactful programs? And how do you know that your plans are progressing appropriately? How do you navigate the increasing number of important competitions annually and quadrennially, and member federations who want performance success every year? So thinking about how have leading coaches innovated in preparation and periodization in the current climate of coaching? So for us, this is a really important topic. And to help us affirm and challenge our thinking, we're going to engage in a conversation about key insights, principles, and concepts related to planning and periodization and critical decision making at the elite level by three leading coaches. So the format tonight is going to be each panelist will speak for about 8 minutes about the topic. Then I'll moderate a conversation with three panelists for half an hour or so. And then the next 20 minutes, we're going to engage online with a chat with people with a Q&A. And then Frank will summate in the final 10 minutes. So I'd like to have a very warm welcome to our three panelists, Matt Horsnell, Angus Ross, and Radhakrishnan Nair. So we're going to start with, in the first presentation, Matt Horsnell. So in introducing him, he's obviously a jumps coach and he specialises in high jump. He's a level 3 coach with the Australian Track and Field Coaches Association. His biggest claim to fame publicly is his personal coach of Nicola Olaslagers for 18 years, gold medal winner in the World Championships in 2025 and indoors, not only this year but also last year. She's an Olympic silver medalist in 2020 and 2024 and holds the Oceania record at 2 meters 04. Emily Whelan, he also coaches her, and she went to the World Championships in 2025. And he's also coaching a number of developing national level jumpers. So he was named Australian Athletics Coach of the Year in 2021. And Nicola last week was named World Athletics Female Field Athlete for 2025. So I always find it interesting where coaches come from in terms of their background. And he's got a unique background compared to many of us in the vocation. He's got a professional background in design systems and project management and works in the mining sector, and has delivered an impressive presentation in talking about triple periodization a few weeks ago to an Australian coaching audience. So welcome, Matt. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. Share that. And so the first thing that we work through is periodizing the year for a three-phase periodized year. One of the things I've found over the years is that you don't get better by jumping all year round. You know, you just have to reload, have a strength block, power block, and then into maintenance for comp periods. So we divide we're selective on competitions throughout the year, and we divide that up and work through to peak at the right time and work through those three blocks for the year. And I've found that pretty successful. And that's a basic plan of 12 months triple periodized phases with we have a lessons learned, and we have amortization phase in the beginning after a break where we get together and we just get the body to not go fully into load. We have a lead-in period. Then we have a testing phase before we go to a strength block, and then a power phase, and 3 competitions. So this is an interesting chart that I updated the other day where we've added things in over the years for Nicola. And you'll see in the middle there in 2018, one of the things we added was we had a heavy activation, 2x2 heavy quarter squats where she's 180 kilos, she weighs 63 kilos in it. And since we introduced that, before every competition she does that, her general preparedness and her feeling at the competition really improved, and she hit improved positions all the way through that with that introduction. And this chart's available online that we can share, as well as we've added other various things in through over the years with gymnastics, recovery systems, and that through especially as the athlete gets older, we found we'd needed that more often. So as we said, mid-October, these are the breaking down areas for each phase. For the first mesocycle phase, then we've got the second mesocycle phase where we've broken up in the strength, power, and then competition phase, and then into the third phase, which I was really happy this year that Nicola was improving, and she did her PB in the third phase at the end of the season. So what we introduced there really told me that worked quite well. So if you look at our typical week, this is a typical week of where we break up. Our running is based around short to long a little bit for high jumpers. So we keep that little bit in, and depending on different phases of the year, like at this phase at the moment, we have 150s in there as well as a longer run. And as we get into that next power phase, we'll move into more of this what's on with running systems. So we'll only typically do 1 session a day. We won't do multiple sessions. So it's made up of 3 loaded weeks, and the green is a deload. This is coming into World Indoor Champs where we had 3 loaded weeks coming to that. Then we had a green deload. Then we reloaded again, and then we deload taper down for the World Indoors. And Nicola went quite well, and she jumped that. And that was interestingly coming off 5 months of solid training, and that was the first competition she did for the year. So she did. I think she needed 1 more to be at a true peak. So, but it was something that she wanted to do to trial. So I'm always open to the athlete having a say in what they do for training. So this was typical for World Champs. As you see, we've come off Lausanne Diamond League. We've loaded, deloaded, then we've reloaded again, and then come into the World Champs where Nicola, coming off that Zurich Diamond League final, that's where she did her 2:04. And I really thought in Tokyo for World Champs, she was ready to do a personal best there as well, but the weather intervened and it was pretty ordinary by the time the final came around. And I think for wet weather, that was her wet weather to be a PB of 2 meters also. So coming off that for strength gym, this is our building up through periods in December, January, where 3 deload, 1, 3 building phases. But those phases in that for our strength gym is all small increments where we increase the load. And this is the second part of this, where we'll do double holds for trap bar deadlifts and this sort of thing, and front squats. We'll introduce a lot of ISO holds within the lift. And Nicola's quite advanced for these. Double holds are at 110 kilos, but we still don't have, like after deload, we'll stick to the program of weight, small increments that we add. So this is our power gym that we add, power cleans, and there's same again, small increments. And Nicola hit those 85 kilos was a PB at that time, and she had hit that during that time, which I was happy with. And this here too, trap bar jump session, we use this to build a concentric, eccentric feelings of the lifter. That it's the way we do these lifts are specially designed for what which I can show you later in this presentation. So as a typical comp phase, as you can see, we'll deload, then we reload to a reasonable level. Nicola, before Zurich Diamond League, she lifted 80 kilos before going into Zurich and Lausanne, and also before going into World Champs for power clean. So she was at a really good level, strength-wise and power-wise. So that's the other part of that comp phase. As you can see, we deload, load, and try to maintain a reasonable amount of strength. And you can see with our quarter squats we were talking about there, where we'll go from pulse movements, just quarter pulse back squats, to heavy overloaded. We tend to try and go to 30% higher than what she's normally used to, but we'll only do 2 by 2 of those. And all that is to get the nervous system to feel that you actually have to work and come out of the different phase that you're normally used to of loading. So I find that works quite well. And testing, we'll skip through this a little bit, where we do a fair bit of testing on different phases, and a lot of that is measuring plyometrics over 20 meters. So this is our sand hops and grass hops with the colors. The yellow is the sand, the green is the grass, and the blue is the track. And you'll see from the year over, this is going into World Indoor Champs and our Australian Champs, and the progression was quite good. With this on the top is left leg, and Nicola's jumping leg is the right. And I was happy that both sides we introduced a fair bit of evenness about her sides of jumping by the time we got to the competition phase. And one of the big things I've seen is that unilateral hops and unilateral plyometrics bounding is way better than double-legged jumps, where you got bilateral jumps. I found that you really do have a problem with transferring to a jump, because I've seen athletes who can jump brilliantly with both legs, but they can't produce that in their high jump, say, because they're used to too much bilateral work and not enough working efficiencies in the unilateral. With Nicola and Katie, that's Katie, this is on the sand, and she jumps off the sand as quick as she does on the grass, and she hops over 20 meters on the track under 3 seconds. So she's quite quick. But in our grass work, for high jumpers, we're really trying to get a higher loading and work through the posterior chain, through the glutes, so we can really work through the reactions. And that's what I find with sand work, that really does support the work we do with there, where you have to use your posterior chain to get up more. It's not a case of doing speed hops low in the hips. It's actually doing them fast, but getting up and having the glutes and the posterior chain really working with the foot contact to make them more efficient is what works really well. So gym testing that we do, this is our one of our main tests, double jumps with the trap bar. And what we try to do there is to decelerate the load and then virtually work back for the rebound jump through the concentric phase a lot quicker. So you look at this testing, where this is 100 kilo trap bar jumps that Nicola does, and you look at around Tokyo World Champs, who is producing, if you look at the blue lines is her PB level for the first jump, and the second blue vertical line is the PB. And you look at moving into the world champs and Zurich, she was hitting those PBs for 100 kilo trap bar double jump. So that's one of the areas that we test, and 80 kilo trap bar jumps is a good indicator of what you see with leading up into the 80 kilo is our general movement, and you can see from the growth from when we start, and you'll see lower areas there. And as we build into comps, that is something that we developed that really shows me that Nicola is ready to fire. And you can see at the end of the season there at the bottom of the page where she was hitting PBs and everything was working brilliantly. So if we look at as a, oh, sorry, it's just, there we go. If you look at, this is a comparison in 21, 22, and the blue lines of what her PBs are now. You can see that she jumped 196 then, and she's jumped 204 now. The comparison in trap bar jumps is a big difference. And power clean and jerks is another lift we do, but we adjust this is 80 kilos. We adjust the weight. Just the way we do the lift to work on the hip position driving up out of the jerk phase, and we don't catch the weight. So these are typical 75 kilo clean and jerks, and you look at the first, there's two measurements we have there on velocity. This is max velocity, and you'll see the max that Nicola produced was coming into the major competitions again. And you'll find what it shows me when she's having travel periods, as you can see after the red lines, the major ones, she tends to drop off, and then we have a period to build up, which is important to have a strength and a power phase to build back up to the next comp phase. So this is typical 2022, same lift, and you can see the blue lines, her PBs, and at the top of the page in 22, she was coming in to be the best she's ever been, but this graph shows she had COVID. She had an injury from a bad back massage in the US, which you'll look at the middle of the range there where everything just fell off a cliff and it dropped off. And it really showed me some good insights to work on to get her back. And you see by the time we got back to a period where we were ready for world champs, her readiness was pretty well ready, and she did okay, and it ended up coming fifth, I think, from a period where she was really struggling because of sickness and that injury. And that's it.
Thanks very much, Matt.
Hey,
I hope that wasn't too rushed.
Cliff, I wonder if it's possible, because we're going to lose Matt.
Yeah.
Should we have some questions for him at the moment? Yeah. Is that better?
We think it's scary, Frank, but we're thinking alike here.
Yeah, okay.
I'd be interested with Angus and Radhakrishnan and Frank, if you've got any questions of Matt before he has to go, because Matt, everybody has got an awards night with Nicola in the local community. So that's why he's so dressed up.
Okay,
yep.
so
I'm not always looking this good.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Matt. I really admire the thoroughness of your preparation. It's very, very well thought out. Just for the benefit of our coaches listening in, you mentioned loading, deloading, reloading, and so on. Can you just give us a quick picture of what are you looking for in each of these phases? That's my first question. The second question is, before everybody else jumps in, I'm presuming you have quite a bit of, you need time to get back home from competitions and do your training and then go back out again. Roughly, what are the timings of these things?
Yeah, we found it was really good to have, like, if we have a month overseas for competitions, and we found come back home for that 6 weeks and then another month of competitions overseas, and we found the athlete and everything really recovered quickly, and we gave us our time to do a strength mini block, then a power block, and then overseas. Where being overseas all the time in long blocks, the athlete really gets fatigue and they get homesick, but they get, it's trying to maintain a long preparation phase. Just
I think when
about
you're
a
on
month, I
tour,
find the athlete. Yeah.
I think Matt, when you're on tour, there's so many other things going on. There's the commercial stuff. There's what the promoters are looking for. There's meeting different people, trying to socialize, and it must be pretty physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting.
Yeah, it is, and it's. I know from a coach's perspective too that I'm lucky I can work overseas and do something. But if I was just over there training and I'd have too many coffees down the corner because you have too much time on your hands. You've got so much training you can do. Having a long period overseas like that, and you're in a hotel room, it drives you nuts. So, and that's the same for the athlete. They miss their local environment and their families and what they've got set up at home. So, really structuring it accurately, and it's working out what goes with the athlete to get them, how many comps do they need to produce a result. That the amount of time, say for Nicola, I've seen her come off a big block of 4 months and straight away hit a PB, and she's good at that. Not all athletes are like that. They'll go, I need at least 3 comps to be somewhere where they want to be, and you have to look at that the individual and how that works for them, and then structure everything around that.
So can I come back just to the first question again? And that is, you use these expressions: load, deload, reload, and so on. What is what is the goal? What is your objective in that? And how do you know you've achieved it? And just what do they mean, so our coaches can understand it?
I think the load really should tie into track and plyometrics and everything across the board, not just gym. So that's a key one. And I think what you need to do to look at the athlete for loading is it's important to get the load where the athlete is feeling uncomfortable, but it's not too light, say in the gym side of it, but it's almost on the edge of what they can't handle. So testing isn't, for me, is never to 1 RM. That's taboo a little bit, but testing is, you're looking for the glutes wobbling at a squat and they're just about to lose form, and you go, okay, that's it. That's the point. Our starting point where when we're loading, it'll be 4, 3, 2, 1, and we finish the 1 on the unstable point, and then we gradually just build it up slowly over time. And that unstable point, all of a sudden you got 10 to 15% stronger without even realizing it.
Okay.
And and I've found that loading, deloading, and the athlete, when you're loading to a point, they need a deload. And the amount of times the athlete has said, we had it this week, oh, why do I still feel so bad? I said, well, deload, you need it. That's when you'll feel your worst, in the deload, because you're recovering. If you didn't have that, you'd be dropping off the other side, and the neural fatigue would be so high. So some athletes, you have to make it individual for the athlete, because some of them might only be able to load for 2 weeks and then have to deload, especially younger athletes. But
so is the deload recovery?
Yep.
Okay.
Deload is reduced volume. 50% reduced volume, and the load is dropped off a little bit, but it's still a reasonable load, but not. Yeah, you reduce volume and load, and then I've seen recovery pretty good with my testing that I have. The gym data shows that dropping off for that 4th week and sometimes the 3rd week. So for Nicola, her best gym data that I get for velocity is mostly 100% first week and 2nd week of loading.
I think Matt, just I'll shut up now, is that what we've all got to keep remembering is that adaptation takes place during recovery.
Yep. 100%. I see it all the time. You 100% have to have recovery. Otherwise, everything you do when the loading is undone.
Yeah. Sorry, Cliff.
No, thanks, Frank. Gus or Radhakrishnan, any questions, comments?
No question. Thank you very much. No questions.
Gus?
Just yeah, really interesting talk. I'm kind of intrigued by some of the specifics, I guess, in terms of the testing. You talked about the 20-meter hopping, for example, and 3 seconds seems really fast. Is that with a standing start or is that with a rolling start? How does that work? Just
That's
to give
with
us
a rolling start. Yeah, that's not standing. Yeah, it's coming off a run in and you're working, but you're working taller. And what we used to do is time them, and it's interesting. You time those things, and the athlete, you know what they're like. They're athletes. It's like, oh, it's a competition. So you're in the middle of this stuff, and they go, oh, I want to bust out a PB. And so through this period where you might be just working away and you're timing these things, and what we used to do is, if they're just blocking, you know how, so I've seen some fast hops where they're just low in the hips and hitting the ground hard, and in the sand that you don't go anywhere and you stop. But some athletes will try and do that. But what we did, if their time was fast and we didn't like the technique, we'd give them a 3-second penalty. So instead of 3.7 seconds, they did 6.7, and they got out of wanting to be, the technique was focused then. So, and then all of a sudden, no penalty points. Well done. So that was something that we had to do to get, what you're trying to do is to get the glutes and the hips and the posterior chain really, and the pickup from the back working really quickly. And you see the hips rise out of that position, and the foot contact. We actually analyze the foot contacts. So if you're looking at the sand coming out the back and the foot's fairly flat, sometimes you'll see the sand go forward when it's a block. So, or if it's too toey, you'll see the sand will be pushed down into with the toe first. So you're trying to get out of that toe first situation, and analyzing some of the sand contacts is quite beneficial. And I know the Cubans, talking to Carlo, he said they used to analyze their foot contacts and measure the depth and all this sort of thing. So it creates another little area that you can work on.
Cliff, can I just ask one more, highlight one more point? I didn't miss the fact that you spoke about gymnastics as part of the general cycle of things. I think that's a really important point for all coaches. Could you just give us a little bit more in that area, the gymnastics?
Yeah, the gymnastics, because what we have for periodization in the week, we have 2 hard sessions. The third session becomes a gymnastics movement one that's orientated around just, you're not jumping on the hard surfaces, so it's back flips and you're working on fun stuff. You might be climbing up ropes and working on different core things, but it's not a session where you're loading the body as much. And I've found when you're trying to structure the week, you've got 2 hard sessions, then an easier movement session, then it becomes 2 to 3 more harder sessions, and then you have a day off once a week where it's full recovery out of that day, where you might just go walking or do something, but you can't have 6 hard sessions every day in a row. You need to mix that up a little bit, and it's the variation as well, that you're doing something different. It's something that's challenging, that the mind gets around, but physically and we've found with the people that we worked with in gymnastics, we can get movement and flexibility stuff, and it's just because it's different, it keeps the neural system fired up, if anything, and the body and everything worked better from all the athletes. I've got Emily doing gymnastics. She couldn't do backflips, and she can do that now, and she's improved 100%.
Thank you.
Matt, I need to let you go, and thank you for your contribution. I've got one question, which sort of, you said you do 1 session a day.
Yep.
So is that by necessity or by design?
By design, yeah. So we have, the only other add-in might be a Pilates session, an easier, and the athlete's feedback to me is they might do a Pilates session before they do a gym, say, or before they'll do a plyometrics, and they've said, "Oh, that's really switched everything on for me," and it goes with that. It's not what I've read with some studies say if you do a big lactic session and you do a big running session, and then you go and do a gym session, it totally negates the strength gains because your body's recovering. It doesn't work.
It's an interesting insight. So, associated with that is what's the duration of these sessions? So, the one session a day, how long does that go for?
Yeah, good 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay.
Pretty by the warm up and movement, and 2.5 maybe when we get to a longer, if we're doing circuit type work and you're right at the maximum load in the week, in that third week. Yeah.
Okay.
But
No, thank you very much. It's been really insightful, and like Frank, congratulations on all the successes you've had, and it's great to see your coach have that longevity with an athlete to really understand their development and transformation. So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And one of the important things too from that is, like, with the athletes I have are so good at doing they do little things like for recovery, glute ball trigger point release afterwards, so that you might have that for a few hours, but then you'll go home, have a recovery, a soak in the bath, but then you'll do a trigger release and some minor stretching out of that for recovery, and that might take another 2 hours. So that for those athletes who are full time, they're totally into that mode of doing that all the time. I'm really lucky to have athletes who are committed to doing all the little things after the session. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you contribute to that, and
Yeah.
great to hear these insights. And I think that a lot of people will learn from how meticulous your planning is, and the rationale behind your planning approach. So thank you very much. Good luck at the awards night. If you can
Thanks,
hang
guys.
on with your phone, that's good. If not, thank
I'll
you once
try
again.
and hook onto it. Yeah, I'll do that as we're driving on, and if I can answer anything, I'll do my best.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Okay, our next panelist is Dr. Angus Ross. Angus was a former New Zealand decathlete. That's where he started off in athletics. And by his own admission, he thinks he had limited ability. He probably had more ability than he thought. But he sees that it was actually a blessing in disguise in terms of having to be curious and wanting to learn more. And it definitely, in his words, helped him to be a better coach. But his other claim to fame is that he was 3 times New Zealand Olympic bobsleigh competitor. So he went to the Olympics in 1998, 2002, and 2006. I first met Angus when he was based in Brisbane, and he was doing his PhD in sports science at UQ. And he's become a very highly regarded coach, sports scientist, and strength and conditioning coach across many sports. And in his current role, he's High Performance Sport New Zealand Technical Lead for Strength and Conditioning. He works across many sports, but his primary sport is track and field, so we're very pleased about that. But he's also coaching New Zealand sprinter Tiana Welpton, who's run 10:10 and 6:50 for the 60 metres. So welcome, Angus.
Thanks, Cliff. I'll just get my sharing on here. Okay, hopefully that comes up. So yeah, my take on this sort of brief is a little different. I'm a little bit more generic in terms of rather than specifics of the hows and whys. So bit of a disclaimer at the start. I don't have the answers. This is just a sort of a random collection of thoughts that follow, and obviously these thoughts reflect my own biases, experiences, and interests. So they may or may not have any relevance to anybody here. So apologies in advance if I'm boring you to tears, but it is what it is. So working back from the comp, what's required to win? What do we have currently? I guess I'm a big advocate of going back to first principles. What are the primary elements that dictate performance, and how can you train and measure them objectively? If you haven't read that, I don't know if you can see on your screen that book cover to the right there. Start at the end. It's a really interesting story about a British cyclist that was in the British program. He got dumped from the British program essentially. And he was an engineer. He and a couple of mates decided that they were going to have a crack at it themselves. They started their own pro team, ended up beating the British national team with a few mates doing their own thing and sort of trying to use their gifts and take a very different approach to performance. It was in the team pursuit. Perhaps not 100% relevant to track and field, but the principles are the same. So obviously, this first principle stuff, it relates to the technical, the physical, and the mental. All of those go without saying. So gifts and curses, and one size doesn't fit all. The athlete, there's just a bit of a story. This is one of the athletes I've worked with since 2018. This is Emma Twigg, who was a 3-time Olympic rowing single sculler when I started working with her. She'd been 3 Olympics. She hadn't medaled in any of them. She was now 32 years of age. Decided after 2 years of retirement that she was going to come back for the 2020 Olympics, which she'd obviously been 2021, which probably was a blessing in hindsight, but for Emma at least. The New Zealand rowing system had been very one size fits all historically, and they probably would argue that case, but I would say they're pretty one size fits all. Didn't really fit what Emma had. She was somebody that needed to train some different aspects. Long story short, she got a team together, trained the way she wanted to train rather than the system approach. Ended up winning the 2021 Olympics, and then she got the silver medal. So the 33-year-old winning her first Olympic medal. Then she won the silver medal in Paris, and she's now converted to coastal rowing and is the current world champion in coastal rowing as well. And I guess to me, it just highlights that whole point of you need to train what you need to train, not what everybody else wants to train. So I mentioned athletes' gifts. Again, I don't know if you can see the whole picture there, but I've got Usain Bolt running beside Bington Su, 2 very talented athletes with 2 very different gifts. I'm pretty big on training the athletes' gifts and maximizing those gifts to the nature of the event. Obviously, every gift can be a curse. It can impair some aspects as well. So you need to understand how those things interact, how they work with performance, and how you might manage them to sort of manifest what you want in terms of the outcome. And this is, I don't know why if this is even relevant, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Random sidebar, the basics are all very well, but sometimes in small nations, and I'm assuming there's quite a few of you watching that are from small nations, you can't just rely on having better talent and doing the same thing as everybody else and expecting to win on the world stage with a sort of a finite talent pool, which is what we have in New Zealand, 5 million people. We're never going to, and a lot of competition in other sports. A lot of our best athletes will go to rugby or netball or something along those lines. So you have a finite talent pool. Doing what everybody else does probably isn't going to win. And I guess the point is here that historical precedent is a gift and a curse. Sometimes we look, I work with Tom Walsh. I've worked with Tom Walsh since 2014, a shot putter. And one of the things that sort of struck me in that space is the US model have been very successful. They do the same sort of things, clean, squat, bench press, and throw. I'm being a bit facetious here probably, but the original protocols and their training is not as sophisticated or as relevant to a rotational event as it might be. Perhaps it might be a hangover from the glide being a predominant technique. And I guess we turned this on its head a little bit, that we didn't have this historical precedent. We didn't know what we didn't know. So we tried to go back to, what are the demands of the event. IP is increasing exponentially. We've got AI, we've got all sorts of publications coming out. So I think it was an advantage in some ways. We made some mistakes, of course, but we were less constrained by historical precedent and what we always do in New Zealand, because we didn't know what we were doing. So it was kind of an interesting way to approach the event, and had some success and some failures along the way, but certainly learned some things. So I'm going to go into some principles. We sort of talk about principles and these are not anything set in stone. They may not even be the right principles to be talking about, but these are ones that have some of my favorite ones, I guess, that have guided me in training. Our first one is maximizing contractile speed and power. Via appropriate training and recovery, and there are ways, and probably beyond the scope of this, but we can talk to this further if we want to, of maximizing fiber type in terms of your 2x, your fast contractile proteins, or the sarcomeres in series, which is the sarcomeres are the contractile elements within muscle, and if you can increase the number of sarcomeres, you get an additive effect on contraction velocity. So there are ways of doing this in training, and I think, in terms of your periodization, there's some things to consider. They have some contraindications as well, which we'll talk to shortly. Train the proximal and distal muscles with equal intent. Most of us, we do clean squats, deadlifts, what have you, trap bar deadlifts. We train all these sort of global multi-joint musculature. But I guess, and then that's fine, that's great, you need those muscles. But I guess I would just advocate for people to be training the sort of the distal elements equally intensely. The hands, if you can't push something off your fingers and shot put, you're going to lose a meter. If you can't express all that power through your calves and feet for runners, again, you leak energy and you lose competitive advantage there as well. Maximize learning of skills and violent intent. I guess I'm just thinking here about training the nervous system. We've got to an age and stage now where there's heaps of tools that are available for objective feedback. I'm just advocating you use them. You can gamify training, you can make it fun, you can drive intent, you can have competition, you can have handicap competitions that make it, with athletes of different levels within your competition, which is, a bit of fun and learning to compete, but also learning to drive the nervous system. A couple other principles that come to mind. The technical model must align to the athlete in front of you. You can't coach positions if the athlete's not capable of those positions. So I've sort of gone down this, and actually probably I have to credit Cliff here. My first session of training with Cliff back in the day, he told me I wasn't flexible enough to run more than 5 meters, and subsequently for the next fortnight, we didn't run more than 5 or 10 meters in any training session, and I had to stretch twice a day, and until I got to a point where I was able to graduate out of that space. But so that sort of stuck with me, and it's certainly some athletes it's not a problem, some athletes it is, but certainly something to adhere to. The strength and length, the long duration isometrics or the intense isometrics certainly can challenge that and have some positive effect. We just heard about gymnastics a little bit there, previous presentation. Move and train in 3D and learn to bounce well would align to that sort of philosophy. I sort of think about the spine mesh and the fascial slings. Again, probably haven't got time to talk about that in any length here, but kind of interesting concepts, and learning to bounce, learning to have coordination, rhythm, and timing. I was a bit of a meathead probably when I was training. I wanted to just rip shit and bust, and you're learning to finesse things a little more. And as you see, really good athletes that move well. I'm currently in South Africa watching Laurent Muley's squad train for a couple of weeks, and some of these guys move really well without necessarily having massive engines, but it's efficient and they produce these great performances. Get good at what matters. I guess that's the other piece, and that sort of was the lesson I learned from Tom particularly. Tom is a guy that has he's got good general metrics, but compared to some of his compatriots, he might not be the fastest, strongest, biggest guy in the world. That said, he's one of the best shot putters in the world, and he's good at what matters. So you have to give them what they need for the demands of the event. Okay, so periodization thoughts. Try to tie some of this together. Fiber type and overshoot is real. If you haven't heard of overshoot, I suggest you probably should look that up if you're working in power events. Large reductions in load will give you an increase in this type 2X fast contractile protein. Nelio Mora, who's at the right-hand side in the picture there, had gold medalists in the long jump in 2008, male and female. He's a strong proponent of using overshoot in his training. It's a period of relatively high load strength training followed by 6 to 8, 9, 10 weeks off from that strong stimulus. You maybe tap the wheel with one session a week. So very useful. I put beware hypertrophy training is a strong driver of maladaptation of fiber type. So if we get to the stage where you have a young athlete and you're trying to get them bigger, just be a little bit wary about that. Maybe you're better off taking your time than driving that by doing, German volume training or something like that, where you're going to fatigue the crap out of the muscle 10 sets of 10, and you're probably going to drive it towards a slower contractile protein. They'll be bigger and stronger and slower. So it's some things to be wary of there. I've sort of become a proponent of overloaded eccentric training, beneficial for fiber type and sarcomeres and series. Again, if you're thinking of periodization in global terms, it probably shouldn't coincide a block of that with the period when you're trying to maximize motor learning, because you're screwing up your Golgi tendon organs and muscle spindles and what have you, and so your kinesthetic awareness is is out a little bit. So trying to learn simultaneously in that period of time might not be your best plan. The other thing with eccentric training is you can do damage, and if you go over the top, it's going to be a long way back. Final couple of thoughts. We need to understand the time courses of adaptation and detraining for different components. Probably, I don't know if you can see on that graph there. Some stuff will be going down, some stuff will be going up. There'll be a sweet spot in the middle. You need to tweak accordingly. This is something you're going to learn from experience. There's some stuff in the literature that will talk to that stuff too, but every athlete's different. And I like, the Matt stuff there. He's worked with Nicola for 18 years. He's gonna understand some of those subtleties a little bit better than most of us would. The other thing here too is with planning and periodization is, sticking to the plan. Some people are sticklers to sticking to the plan. I think that's a mistake personally. I think there's some level of auto-regulation is required, even if just coach athlete discretion rather than a systematic approach. You need something there to go, okay, you know what, we've cooked that goose, we need to back off a little bit here, or we need to do more, or this athlete doesn't respond, or whatever it might be. The final piece there, multi-year vision is required. Training can't just stay the same once certain buckets are full. You need to know in advance that, okay, once you get an athlete to strong enough, okay, then what are the things we go to next? And so I think it's, rather than just doing it ad hoc as you go along, it's better to plan in advance and sort of attack those things with a plan that probably take 2 years to get it strong enough. Okay, then what will we do? Then we'll work, X, Y, and Z. So the final thoughts. Coaching is part science, part art, and big part sales. And I say sales in as far as if you can't sell it to your athletes and they don't believe in it, you're probably not going to get the result you're after. So, I would stand by that. Another one, winning means doing it on the day, which doesn't happen by accident. Training's very, very well, but athletes need to learn to compete. And you can drive that competition by doing competitions, obviously, of increasing intensities, and or by making consequence in training, having competitive elements in training, driving consequence, having bets, whatever it might be. There's certainly options there, and I've certainly seen some of those with other coaches taken to reasonable extremes that make the consequence something that athletes, and it has driven very good competitors as a result. And the final point there is that athletics is hard. I've listened to a couple of podcasts of coaches recently, and they were sort of saying you need a special type of mindset to do all this stuff, and because it's not fun. It's like, well, I think that's bullshit. This stuff needs to be fun. You need to have some fun elements in training, and joy should be part of the plan. And it could be just by the personalities of the team. It could be by structured stuff, which is doing stuff that's different, stuff that's fun, something that's a little bit out of the box. So yeah. Anyway, that's me. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, Gus. Okay, Frank or Radhakrishnan?
I'm happy to go first. Yep. Just a couple of points. What exactly did you mean by fascial slings?
So you're aware of the fascia that covers all our muscles, and so we have this connective tissue that goes over our muscles. We develop slings in accordance to the stress we place on our system, if you like. So you and I might do the same exercise and would have the same routine. We'd probably have the same slings that occur. So there might be diagonal slings if you're a thrower. And for example, I read a thing a little while ago. Thomas Ruler, the javelin thrower, he'd had a lot of stuff. They'd been doing high resolution ultrasound on him, and he had the fascial sling that came diagonally across the front of his body from throwing the javelin. Something like 3 millimeters thick on his right-hand side, 0.5 millimeter thick on his left-hand side. So the sort of diagonal sling across the body had been developed in along lines of stress. And we know that, for example, even we talk about plantar fascia on your feet. Children when they're crawling, the fascia on their feet, before they learn to walk, is very underdeveloped. It develops with stress. So fascial slings are things that are lines of collagenous tissue that develop along lines of repetitive stress. And so
I appreciate that. The fascia argument has actually been pretty richly discussed over the last couple of months.
Right, sorry, yeah,
and that's really why I was mentioning. I asked it because I wasn't sure what the slings meant. But you're right, and hopefully Cliff and I have spoken about the next iteration of Coaching Matters. We could very well have another look at that whole area. You mentioned the feet. One of and we've got a colleague from South Africa who will be in on that session, where he's pointed out that the plantar vault is allowed to collapse far too early in a young person's life. It can be corrected, but it takes, as you know in life, it's better to get things right rather than to put them right later. But I'm really pleased that you raised that. The other point that you were making is you have to coach the athletes in front of you, and I get that. And I also completely accept the idea that our priority is to coach the strength first. You only coach the weaknesses if it's interfering with the strength, or in a team sport, if it's interfering with other people's strengths. And I think that's a really good point to have made. However, when you say what's in front of you, and you spoke about range of movement, sometimes you need to change what's in front of you.
100%.
I really understand the importance of coaching the difference, and we'd better be good at that. Maybe come back to that later. But for example, in the scrum in rugby, if you do not have a pretty extreme dorsiflexion in the feet, the scrums, the player is not going to get low enough in the scrum.
Agree, totally agree.
You end up having to work on that. And so my question to you on that one is, how far do you go in that to extend the range of movement, to extend what you have in front of you?
I guess it depends what you see as the final outcome, and so if you have a position like I've got an athlete currently who's not particularly elastic but has great muscular power, and when you're running, so we're sort of going along with a model of if everybody else is running 100 and doing it in 45 steps, and Usain Bolt's doing it in 41 steps, and this kid is a tall athlete, can he do it in 41 steps as well? What would it take to achieve that? Is moving outside of the accepted norm, if you like, of a technical model, getting greater extension. There's this stuff by Peter Way and another couple of authors that sort of suggest that if you go outside the range of your normal extension, you become less efficient. Okay, I accept that. But the problem with it, my argument, the contra argument to that is they didn't train those people to be elastic and efficient outside the range of motion. And so can we train somebody to be more elastic and efficient outside the range of motion? Yes, we know we can do that. Okay, so then can you change the model? Can you change the constraints of the whole thinking in that space? And I would argue you probably can. Now, this may end in tears and we have a disastrous season, but we're sort of working towards that end to change the model and use the gifts that he has, but also develop new gifts to complement that model the thing that we're targeting, I suppose. If that makes sense.
Okay. So just one last point then is that, and I really like the point that you're making about there's a time lag between your maximum power and the most efficient movement. I actually found that time lag different between men and women. Right. So in coaching Daley Thompson, I needed 21 days before he would actually peak his movement potential from that. But with Kim Hager and the heptathletes I worked with, women tend to lose that power quicker than men.
Yep.
So that had to be I think broadly speaking, that was 14 days for them and 21 days for the guys. Have you come across that?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and I've certainly seen and I guess it becomes, is it a male-female thing, or is it the strength reserve piece, which obviously that goes hand in hand, and maybe the men have a higher strength reserve, so then they can detrain a little bit, and their explosive potential goes up as they're detraining because their max strength goes down, the explosive potential is going up. So yeah, it could be a male-female thing, it could be a strength reserve piece, but I agree with you, and I've seen that. I know with British Cycling when they did a lot of that overshoot stuff. Victoria Pendleton, I believe, would only do 2 or 3 weeks of really reduced loading, which kind of aligns to what you're talking about. Whereas Chris Hoy and co might go up to 8 or 9 weeks with almost zero gym work. So yeah, certainly it's different for different people. And I'm not sure whether it's a hormonally biased thing for female, or it's a strength reserve piece. I don't know the answer to that.
Great. Thanks very much. And thanks for the presentation. Great stuff. Thanks, Angus.
No, pleasure.
Okay, Radhakrishnan, you got any questions?
Yeah, no question, but thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. And
Oh,
many
thank
of the content was in line with my planning and my doing. Especially, I like the word winning is not accidental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank
Actually,
you so
Angus,
much.
I've got a quick one. I've got a quick one, and you sort of touched on it a bit, because when we talk training and periodization and planning, what tends to be omitted is mental skills and learning to compete.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you talked about consequences in training, and that's part of learning to compete.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually periodize that? And if so, is it intentional or is it organic?
I think you can periodize it, and I think you probably do need to when you're trying to learn a lot, you wouldn't be doing the consequences so much in the early phases. You're trying to change things, and then obviously later on, when you're trying to get ready, the last 6 to 8 weeks competing, the consequences, the competitions, the banter will get ramped up, and yes, and I see Dale Stevenson would have with Tom, that they had to the point where you had to get a tattoo if you lost something, and there was all sorts of the consequences of getting reasonably severe. So, but it made some of these guys really good competitors, which is kind of like you go, okay, well, interesting. Pressure forges diamonds. That whole idea is there was something in that.
Cliff, can I just chip in one last thing here? You mentioned you've got to sell. And Cliff, I know, has heard me saying this several times. If you want to take people with you, you only need 2 skills. You've got to be able to teach, and you've got to be able to sell. You've got to teach to the head for understanding, sell to the heart for engagement.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how many coaches practice selling.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Well, that's where people have to coach and give a rationale for why they do what they do. And that's where the co-design and working with athletes to co-construct to some degree, particularly as you become more established as a partnership, I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Gus. That's great. Krishna, your turn. So he's got a BA and he also got a diploma in coaching. He's also a bit different to most of us. Like, he's not only a coach and a World Athletics level 5 coach, but he's also a certified technical official. He's been head coach for India at World Championships 2015, 2017, and the Olympic Games for Rio in 2016. And he's currently head coach for Indian Athletics and has played a key role in the coaches' education system in India. So welcome.
Thank you, Cliff. Let me apologize first. My English pronunciation will not be that good because it is Indian English. Hope it will not be a problem for you. So before sharing my screen, I'll give a brief introduction of planning, what we do in India. First, we plan the competitions before planning the training, because we feel the competition we plan according to the in line with the international competitions which we have to participate in the current next year. For example, we have planned about 40 competition in 2026 from January till October. Our competition season finished similar like World Athletics. It finished by October, and again we start our preparation from November middle. So 40 competition we have prepared, because as from Rose, as he said, it is to train athlete to compete. We have had some researches on the elite athlete, that how many competitions they participate before their major competitions. After that, accordingly, we plan this 40 competition in the year. It starts from the February and it ends by October. For example, the coming year, the major competition for us is World Relays, and then we have Commonwealth Games, and then we have Asian Games, and World Athletics Ultimate Championship. So based on that, we plan the competition. So the competitions after planning the competition, we plan our training plan. And then one important thing, what I understand, the coaches should understand the competition, how they should train the athlete, how they should periodize the training plan. There are in our country, there are so many coaches, they don't understand this. For example, in the last competition season, we have an athlete who jumped 17.37 meters in triple jump in the month of March. So I don't think his coach was a smart coach. He could not sustain the performance in the World Championship. He could not even touch 17 meters. So the federation, the chief coach planning is completely spoiled by this way. So before publishing the calendar for the competitions, we had many meetings with the coaches to make them understand how to organize the training. To my concept, periodization is not a model. It is a concept of a coach, how he prepare it, how he periodize it. Now, recent days olden days we have only single periodization, double periodization, but now we have multiple picking, multiple preparation. So we call it as block periodization, which we follow now. But we should understand, the coach should understand where my athlete should peak. So now let me go to my screen. It's not much informative, but so can you all see my training, my screen? So this is competition calendar 2026 and training methodology. Before publishing this calendar, we tried to educate our coaches how to plan their training. Total, we have about 48 weeks of macro cycle training in the next year, 48 weeks. So we have divided into three parts, like 16 weeks for the general preparation and adaptation, and then specific preparations, that is part of pre-competition, and then competition period, and then transition. Transition is the smallest period of our periodization. It is unique from one to another and one to another country. So we start our competitions. We start our competition from February. And the training and competition schedule is being planned accordingly. The most important thing is that the annual training plan to establish the competitive schedule for the athlete to determine which competition he or she required to peak. The competition schedule is, of course, is established by the sports governing body, that is our national federation. And the competition require the athlete to be peak performance and often provide guidelines of organizing the athlete's annual training plan. According to the competition which we plan, we are planning our annual training. As I said, we have 48 weeks of training of a macro cycle with different micro cycle and things. So, as I am not repeating, we start our competition in the end of the general preparation and adaptation. This is, in fact, is a test for the coaches as well as for the athletes to evaluate where he or she stands. And we have two broad categories. One is major official competition and preparatory competition. Preparatory competition is more, and in the major competition is like our Asian Games, World Championship, and Olympic Games. And here we expect the athlete to peak their performance. For that, the planning should be, as I said, from Rose, I read, winning is not accidental. We need to practice, we need to learn how to compete. This is more important than what is that we emphasize on our athlete and our coaches to do it. Now, in the preparatory competition, that is preparatory competition, the competition fall in preparation and general preparation, specific preparation period. There will be no specific tapering strategies. And that all are the competition. You can say a competition with high intensity, a training session with high intensity. Generally, we do end of the week or end of the month. And as I said, here we can attain the feedback regarding the specific aspect of training, what we had done in preparation season or general preparation or adaptation. So we should not consider this competition for peaking the athletes. If we do it, we fail. So this information has to be informed to the athlete as well as mainly the coaches should understand that. For example, in a javelin throw, when he or she makes some changes in a runway or for example, runway, you can test the technical change, what you made in him or in her during this competition, which is, we call it as preparatory competitions. So, as I said, elite athletes start competition from February to March. That is what we understand from the searching on elite athletes participation. And even many elite athletes continue the competitiveness even after the major competition. They sustain, they continue. For example, most of the diamond leagues happen, final diamond league happens after the World Championship and after Olympics. But you can find the athletes are maintaining their form, maintaining their peak during even after the major competition. So how can we do that? That is the main, another question what we find difficult. For example, after the World Championship, we had our National Open Championship within a week. Immediately after a week. Most of the athletes kept away from that, but they did not participate in the Open National Championship. When we discussed with them, they said, our form was lost. Then what is the purpose of again competing? So we should teach them and maintain their performance even after the major competitions. So this is one example what I've seen. That is for 400 meter hurdle from USA hurdler. She has participated almost 9 competitions, that too in different events. It is not that her event was 400 meter hurdles. So we also insist our athlete, it is not necessary if you are a 400 meter runner, you should participate in 400 meter always. You can go for 100 meter, you can go for 200 meter, you can go even for 800 meter. So have you seen that the way of our progressions, and that is what on study I made, how many competitions generally world champions take before the major competition. In 2025 Olympics, you can find, 2025 World Championship, you can find how many competitions she participated before her main competitions. So I know that is all is known to you, but may be known to the participants who are attending this webinar. So how do we plan? That is, our federation plan preparatory competition. That is, training plan should include secondary preparatory competition as hard sessions and to test the ability. As I said in the beginning, it is a hard session. It is not a competition. A competition with high intensity, a training session with high intensity. and the competitive schedule as a build-up competition for the major competition. We should schedule these competitions as build-up competition for the major competitions. Specific training strategy are not used. However, the specific tapering strategy are not used. However, the schedule must allow time between the preparation and competition and major competitions. So the tapering, this is of course not to discuss much on this platform. You all know, I think most of the participants also know how the effect of tapering during competition, how the performance is peaked. So I think I don't need to explain much. This is another graph, how the tapering, fatigue, preparedness, and fitness goes during optimal taper length. If it is generally we do 7 to 8 days before the major competition. And you can find the fitness level after the tapering. And the relationship among fatigue, fitness, preparedness, and taper length during the taper, fatigue decrease rapidly, while fitness is maintained for a little longer depending upon the composition of taper. So what we ask our coaches to avoid, don't make your athlete to participate in every available competition which interrupt the athlete's training and ability to develop physiological, technical, and tactical skills required for major competitions. The other mistake the coaches do, attempting to peak the athlete for every competitions what they participate using tapering strategies. And the athlete peak too frequently will need a large number of restoration-based training sessions that will not be enough actual training to enhance the physiological, tactical, and technical characters. This is a competitive calendar showing emphasis, where we have to give more emphasis. So the preparedness you can find during the peaking, and where we have to give minor emphasis and where we have to give major emphasis, all marked. And most of the national championship, you may have to give major emphasis because that will be the selection trials for the final major championship. This is another competitive calendar. And planning for preparatory competition, already I explained, I told. When constructing the training plan for the competitive phase, we have to consider sequence of frequency of competition and how they're related to allow to recovery after competition. See, competitiveness. There are so many coaches complain that she does 300 meter 46 seconds, but in the competition she does not perform. So how do we achieve that? Competitiveness has to be trained and it has to be converted in the competitions. For that, the athlete need to compete in more number of competitions. Select challenging competition because unchallenging competition demotivate the athletes. And challenge the athlete by placing against opponents with superior capacity. When we do preparatory competition and planning for preparatory competition, these are the things to be considered. So objective of preparatory competition, what I was talking about. Number one is physiological, bringing the athlete's physiological capacities, technical skill, tactical abilities, and psychological state, and thus performance to the very highest level in the major competition. And I like to add, we need, as the question was there, we need to develop mental skills. Physical skill, mental skills are as equal to mental skills. Both developmentally an athlete can perform. Developing both physical and mental skill, then only an athlete can develop. What I understood and what I was experiencing, by competing in many number of competition, the athlete get the athletes develop their mental skills also, like confidence. One of the examples. So we need to have a special training for mental skill, but automatically by competing in many competitions, the athlete is achieving the confidence how he can perform, and it will definitely help the athlete to perform in the competitions. Then, as I said, competitiveness has to be trained, as it is not accidental. You need to train them how to compete. Not something that we can just turn on in a competition. As Rose said, it cannot be an accidental thing. It has to be trained. So the stress of a competition often makes the athlete shut down. The preparatory competition train the athlete psychologically in a progressive way. That is what I said. I just told that the mental skills are also developed by competing in preparatory period. This is the stress curve in a season. You can find the volume, intensity, and the stress, how in the transition, in the preparatory period, and the competitive. So this is grouping approach and cyclic approach. Of course, many coaches approach in different way. The grouping approach is a method of planning 2 or 3 weeks in a row and compete. The athlete take part in competition or participate in several events in the weekend. It's not necessarily the same event, different events. Followed by several microcycles of 3 or 4 weeks, and they are dedicated and allow the athlete to prepare for another 2 or 3 weeks of group competitions. Then the cyclic approach. Cyclic approach, in this approach, the coach may take the athlete to several competitions in every 2 weeks to gain information about the athlete in a competitive situation and allow the coach to modify the training plan based on the feedback gathered in periodic competitions. Generally, this the cyclic approach being done with the developing athletes, because they will be changing the technique, they will be developing certain skills. So the cyclic approach I suggest for the developing athletes. That's all. Thank you for listening me. I hope there was some information new to the participants in my small presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Radhakrishnan. Very nice. And interesting insights into the Indian context. So that's great. Okay, any questions, Frank or Gus?
Yeah, can I just very, very quickly chip in? I think I like the idea that, of course, there's the preparatory aspect of competition, and there's the competition aspect, the serious stuff. In the preparatory, it was interesting. All three speakers this morning have referred to that as being actually pretty specific to the individual athlete, how many competitions they need in order to prepare. And maybe that comes actually, part of that variation comes over years of experience. So, for example, when we talk about preparation competitions and delivering on the day, that's actually for a particular level of athlete, isn't it? I mean, our younger athletes coming through probably are not doing that. They're looking for the PBs. And whatever time they come, they come. And then there's a shift in the discipline of all that. But coming back to the idea of preparation and peaking, you can look at that from the point of view of a season, of course, a sense of double vision. What's my dream? What am I trying to achieve this year? And what do I have to do in the other competitions that I have to take care of this? But also on an Olympic cycle, because an Olympic cycle is not something you just do in 1 year. At least it's going to be a 4-year cycle, where your double vision is the Olympic Games and the milestones are each season. And I'm hoping that what was the real message that was coming through from Radhakrishnan was, whatever you do in these preparatory competitions, whether it's in the annual cycles going through to the Olympic Games or in a single annual cycle, they have to contribute to the dream. You use the one to serve the other. But yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Yeah, I've got a little question as well, Radhakrishnan, regarding, you talked a little bit about the maintenance of performance post a peak, and yes, you had examples of some of those athletes, and sometimes they changed events and did other bits and pieces. Do you have any insights as to what you think are the key? Because obviously there's a mental fatigue from doing the same thing. You peak for one thing, and so there's a mental aspect. But some athletes that are in specific events might not have that same diversity of events that they can do. Like a shot putter's not going to go out and do pole vault for the next couple of weeks to get some diversity. Are there any other insights you'd have in terms of how you maintain that form once you've had a big emotional peak? Do you have any thoughts on that? Just trying to maintain that, for example, for a final Diamond Leagues or anything to that end?
Oh, I did not understand any. If Frank can speak about it, because it is very difficult to understand New Zealand English.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Angus, can I just pick up on that one? I think you've hit a very important nail on the head. We haven't really had much time to cover this this morning, or morning my time, and that is emotional investment. I had to say, if we go back in rugby to the World Cup in Japan, I had to hold my hand up for Eddie, because I was the strategic consultant in that program. What I didn't account for was the effect of the emotional investment against New Zealand 1 week before South Africa, because that really was we were taking on the greatest team in the world, and everything was really channeled into that, and the 5 days of recovery was just not enough. And the one thing that maybe we as coaches should have a really good look at now is, how do we get physical recovery and mental recovery are really relatively simple. Emotional recovery is not. And emotional the impact of emotional investment is huge, physically and mentally.
No, good points. Yeah.
And I just think Cliff knows that I'm pretty hot on the idea of having a world symposium at some point on recovery. And I really think one of the centerpieces of that is going to have to be for us to realize that we as coaches ourselves, as well as the athletes, have got to understand that we need to recover emotionally.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Recovery is not well understood.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important topic. But we're running out of time. There's a couple of comments in the chat room. Angus, you've got a friend with Dhruv, who's at Hamilton. He wants to be your intern. So I might send him. He can contact me, and I'll send him your details and see if he can. So if you need an offsider, he's offering to be.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
I think Rita's directing this question to you as well. You've mentioned deviation from the technical model. It's very individual, but what are your guidelines which you are not prepared to compromise on? So what's negotiable, what's not negotiable?
Are we talking a specific technical model, or I mean, I guess it goes back to that first principles piece. That what are the pieces that drive the outcome, and so you can't deviate to a point where you're going to compromise the outcome, I suppose. In a running context, I think, well, let me take it back to cycling, because I worked with cycling for a number of years, and one of the things they did in cycling was, we often hear that athletes and coaches drive, 10 years ahead of the research or whatever, and we often hear that as a thing. It's not always the case. In cycling, there's some research came out of Australia and America in the early 2000s showing that the whole idea of an optimal cadence is that there's a cadence at which you produce peak power at, and people were under gearing because it was historically you had to be a peddler in cycling, so they were under gearing and they were missing the peak power band of their cadence power relationship. When athletes started using this change in gearing, if you like, there was a massive change in performance. Now I wonder, so I'd argue in terms of going back to the Rudy's question, that you need to understand the pieces that drive the outcome and then adjust accordingly. I'd be prepared to throw anything out technically if it didn't drive that, just because it was done, because that's what we always do. I guess there's injury risk in doing that, and the road I'm probably traveling with, the athlete I'm working with currently, there's an injury risk associated with going outside the normal ranges. But you need a chronic adaptation piece to prepare for that, I suppose, rather than just jumping straight into it. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question particularly well, but difficult without specifics possibly.
Okay. Well, thanks, Gus. Radhakrishnan, thank you to you as well. And in Matt's absence, I hope he's enjoying the sports awards. Thank you to all three panelists. You were terrific, providing some insights about this is really an interesting and a very important topic. I'm going to hand over to Frank now. Frank, you've got 5 minutes.
Yep, I'll go as fast as I can. Well, and congratulations to you, Cliff. I mean, you pulled together a fantastic team today. Thank you very much indeed for that. So, very quickly, we spoke initially about triple phasing, which I think is bringing tactical periodization up front in track and field athletics. I like the idea that was mentioned of 4 weeks in a row on the road for competitions, 6 weeks getting back to preparation again. Critical focus on deloading and deloading, which we also understand to be recovery, is critical for adaptation. Personal bests, not measured by 1 RPM, but by touching the uncomfortable. I like that idea. Gymnastics and Pilates and the foundation work, absolutely critical. And I really wanted to spend a lot of time on the difference between plyometrics on sand, grass, and on track, because I think that's a very, very clever combination. Then we moved on to the idea of planning backwards. If you don't know where you're going, how do you plan your journey? We've got to be able to coach the difference, and that was referred to as gifts. I really liked that idea, Angus, which made me think about prioritizing our strengths as opposed to focusing on weaknesses. We mentioned brilliant basics, absolutely fundamental. We've got to get that right, but we've also got to remember that when you're working with a top athlete, you're not working with a Testarossa or the world's greatest sports car. You're talking about a Formula One car, and that means coaching something different on top of the basics. We've got to develop the whole movement chain. I like that idea, and we spoke about the feet. I'm hoping we're going to get to that one again in the future. I also like the idea that progression is not linear, folks, and all coaches should please understand that. Progression is not linear, and the progression of components of performance do not move in parallel. We spoke about being able to teach and to be able to sell, and I think all of us have got to learn a little bit more about how to sell. Then we got out to setting out a competition plan first. Radhakrishnan mentioned this, and the planning process must be understood then by coaches, then fitted to the season, building up to a peak. Therefore, as he referred to in his presentation, block periodization, using 48 weeks to go through a cycle of preparation, competition, and transition. Final couple of points: the number of preparation competitions to be ready for the big stuff, absolutely directly proportional to the athlete. They will all be pretty different. Personal best advancement for kids is what we focus on, being better today than you were yesterday. Then you move on, and in time, to the idea of personal best on the day, and that, of course, that's the gold medal stuff at the end of the day. And finally, double vision not only applies to the season, but also to a four-year cycle. And for all coaches listening in, I think that's been a very, very instructive morning, and morning for me anyway, and I hope for you. Once again, Cliff, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Frank. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for giving us a good platform for speaking about.
Thank you, Radhakrishnan. Really good to see you, mate. And to you, Angus.
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
And thank you, Jimson. Thanks, Jimson, behind the scenes for getting all the technology right, mate. That's great. Thank you.
All good.
Thanks,
see you in a couple hours.
Thank you.
But you won't see me. And Angus is going to bed. It's nearly midnight, so.
See you later, Jimson. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Gus, I'll give you a call.
Cheers.
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 Gus, I'll give you a call.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Thanks, Angus.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See you, Frank.
See you, Cliff. Have a good night's sleep.